The story follows a 12-year-old boy. Oh, my fucking neighbour is fucking mowing the lawn again.
Oh.
Alright, no, we're going to keep going. The story follows a 12-year-old boy.
Whoa. We can't cut it there, bro.
Right, no, it's okay. He's fine.
You literally just said my fucking neighbour, and you're like, okay, the story follows.
Alright, okay, let's go.
Okay.
Right, the story follows a...
No, what are you doing?
What?
Let me give you an intro. Okay. Sam, do you want to go over the story overview? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Rewatch podcast. My name is Jaden.
My name is Samuel.
Ooh, switch up. And this is a podcast where we rewatch classic or current films, and then we decide whether they deserve a rewatch from you, our followers. Before we begin, a like on this video would be most appreciated, and you can subscribe to our channel. And for our Spotify listeners, you can also find us on YouTube by searching the Rewatch. We are the first result that comes up.
Pretty dope. Alright, in terms of story overview, obviously this week we rewatched Coco, which is a 2017 American 3D computer animated fantasy film, obviously Pixar Disney related. The story follows a 12-year-old boy named Miguel who is accidentally transported to the land of the dead, where he seeks the help of his deceased musician great-great-grandfather to return him to his family among the living, and to reverse his family's ban on music. The three sort of main characters in this movie, as far as I was concerned, I can't really remember the names of anybody else. So we have Miguel, who's obviously the 12-year-old boy the story follows. Yeah, I never really got invested in him, to be honest. I mean, he's a 12-year-old boy at the end of the day, can't really do much.
You can't like, not reminisce, but you can't, since we're a bit older, it's kind of hard to connect with his idols and such.
Yeah, 100%. Going onwards, Héctor probably was my favourite character in the film. I think I probably sort of empathise and sort of...
That's the word.
Yeah, empathise with him most. I was invested in his character the most. But as far as everybody else, I wasn't really keen, to be honest. Cruz as well. Another main character. He's also a dead person. He's Miguel's idol, so he's the great-great-grandfather that Miguel is aspiring to be. Do you want to give your general thoughts of the movie, your pros and your cons, before we take a bit of a dive into the plot?
Yeah. Okay. So, what I liked about this film, which I do with every Pixar film, is the animation style and how they keep improving and doing different things each film. And we saw this in Toy Story 4, where I watched an Insider video by Insider, and it was kind of showing how they've improved on their fur animation over the years in comparison to the first Toy Story, where they had Sid's dog, and it kind of just looked like a flat sort of texture.
Demented
but in Toy Story 4, in Toy Story 4, it looks so real, like... It's incredible. So
I think it almost looks too good. What are your thoughts? It's
kind of like the Uncanny Valley in a way. Have you heard of that?
No, I have not. I have no idea what that is.
It's basically where something looks so realistic that it starts looking weird, and you see this in exactly the Polar Express.
Oh yeah.
Where the characters, they try to make them look real, that they look weird.
Yeah.
It's like that, yeah.
But, no, because that's what I thought. Like, there are certain moments where we get, like, close-ups of Miguel's face when he's got, like, wet cheeks, and it just looks too real for me. Like, animation is fantastic. You know, we look at movies like Into the Spider-Verse. The best thing about that movie is the unique animation style.
Yeah,
You
for
know,
sure.
you look at things like Toy Story, and yeah, they were revolutionary for their time, but you know, it's the art that goes into the animation. And if you just make it look like so close to real life, you're sort of going away from the actual purpose of animation.
Yeah.
That's for me anyway. That's my personal thing. But then again, you do look at this movie and think, like, damn, that's good animation.
Yeah. Yeah, like I was looking at the scene in particular where Miguel kind of finds the bridge that connects the land of the dead and the land of the living, with all of the orange or yellowish sort of leaves. And they would have had to create a whole new program to actually develop that and render it and make it look real and have the characters interact with it and walk on it and such. It was actually quite fascinating to look at, and you know, it's a spectacular part of the film because it actually plays quite a big role as well. So we don't see it once; we see it a few times.
That is true. What did you
Yep.
think of the music?
Yeah, it was pretty good. I mean, Pixar has done a lot of iconic themes, and nothing from this really stood out to me. And that's not saying that there was, you know, bad music in this film. It's just that it wasn't as memorable as, you know, the Monsters Inc. theme, or, you know,
Yeah, or Toy Story, You Got a Friend in Me.
Toy
or
Story, or the
just
Up
anything.
theme, anything else. Yeah, it was still good music. It's just probably because it's so recent, it's still, you know, it hasn't really found its place yet.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think, yeah, there were no real songs that really stood out for me in terms of, like, what is Coco, like, it's this song. Whereas, like, obviously, for other Disney movies, like, you know, your Frozens and your Toy Stories, like, they've all got their one big song, and that can sort of, like, I don't know, generalize the movie into a single song. But I don't think this movie has such a thing. I mean, I think the songs are good, and I think the songs are going to be, you know, better received by the audiences that they're intended to be.
For sure.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think that's us. I think we're probably not the target market in terms of the people who are going to really enjoy this movie. Like we don't know about this Day of the Dead event. That's not a big thing for us, but I can imagine for somebody who that is a big celebration, you know, every year. I imagine the music in this movie is going to mean a lot more to them. Whereas, you know, for me, I don't want to say, like, I personally, like, didn't really like this movie, but I will say that I don't think the movie is intended for me in that respect. Like, I don't think this movie was made for someone like me, and I don't say that as in, like, my race or anything like that. I think this movie can be enjoyed by everybody. I just think, like, in terms of what I like and what I don't like just in movies, you know, I just don't. This movie didn't really hit the mark with me personally. Like, I don't know. I think I enjoyed Onward more in certain areas, but, like, in terms of, like, just overall generally, I was just like, I just failed to get invested in Miguel, who's the main character. But anyway, that's just how I feel. So that's sort of like a con that I went through, but
I'm going to stop you on your tangent now.
Yeah, thanks.
Before you start rambling on, and this is another, you know, 2-hour podcast.
Yes, I don't want to make a Coco 2-hour
I get what
podcast.
you're going at. You know, the film is intended for an audience, and you don't really put yourself in that sort of audience.
Yeah, not really. I want to go through quickly some of the things that I noticed at the very start of the movie, just generally. The movie felt very unoriginal for me, and I think you're probably going to disagree with me on this because you think the story was quite, you know, fresh.
Yeah.
And I get, like, the whole concept of, like, a living dead is fresh. I get that. But at the start, I thought I was watching Kung Fu Panda at one stage because... and just, like... And Footloose. Like, okay, I'm going to say a few movies here, right? Kung Fu Panda, every Disney princess story, Ratatouille, and Footloose. Combine those, like, the premise of those movies... and you get a kid who wants to, play music and be a musician, and an overbearing family who's holding them back in an ignorant fashion, sort of saying, I don't want you to do that. And the story is the character, ignoring the influences and then finding something, and they all learn eventually to embrace what the character wants to do. Like at one stage, the dad is like, come on, Miguel, like pull yourself together, and then he puts an apron on him and he's like, come on, off to work. It's taken directly out of Kung Fu Panda. Like, because you know how Kung Fu Panda's like, I want to be
Poe's dad.
I want to be a ninja warrior, and he's like, oh, settle down, Poe, and he puts the apron on him and he's like, we got work to do.
Cook the noodles, that's right.
Cook them noodles. But for me, it just felt so unoriginal for me personally, at least at the start anyway.
I get what you're going at there, but yeah, I'm not gonna disagree with you. I do see those things now that you've pointed them out, but at the same time, they are very minor things.
Yeah.
And this film has a lot of plot twists and different things that they're doing as well. It's not like The Force Awakens compared to The New Hope, where it's basically,
I think we talked about the sequel trilogy enough today.
Yeah. But that was just an analogy to point it out. They haven't slapped a whole new cover on it and called it their film. Yeah, exactly. It has its different things as well as definitely. Its same things.
Take that, Force Awakens. Just to go on from that though, apparently, according to some people, this movie is very similar to a similar movie called A Book of Life, which is an animated movie set during the Day of the Dead, which was directed by a Mexican animator. The film was celebrated as an authentic love letter to one of Mexico's most iconic celebrations, while at the same time mashing it up with American music for an interesting mix between the two. I've never seen A Book of Life, so I can't really comment on whether it is similar or not, but it sounds the basic premise of, the Day of the Dead thing, sort of like the celebration is inspiring a movie. So I can see why people would be angry, but then again, like, it's not a crime to set a movie on on the same celebration for me. Yeah. Anyway, I can't say because I haven't seen A Book of Life.
Yeah, okay. Moving on, did you spot any cameos in this film?
I did. It was perhaps my favourite moment in the film when I saw the Pizza Planet truck at the very start. Just fly past the window for some reason. I'm not entirely sure what the Pizza Planet truck's doing there, but, we'll take it.
It's in every film, so they just have to put it in somewhere.
Yeah.
It seemed like a sort of fitting area to put it.
Yeah, it goes by very fast, doesn't it? Like.
Yeah, so for our viewers, that was at 4 minutes, 3 seconds, if you want to go back and check that out.
Oh, you got the time, Mark.
I have impressive. The timestamps.
Good on you.
Yeah, so I also spotted several Pixar characters from other films in plush toy film. I don't know if in plush toy variation, I guess. Did you see that?
No.
So this was at 4 minutes 50 seconds, and we saw characters such as Mike Wazowski and Sully from Monsters Inc.
Really?
And Woody and Buzz from Toy Story.
Oh, really? Whereabouts? What were they doing?
They were on a pole on a pillar on like a side of a shop. So it's on the right-hand side of the frame if you want to watch that back.
I'm just looking it up now. Oh, yeah, I can see that. Oh, cool.
You see it now? Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, do we want to get into the actual story?
Yeah, let's take a deep dive. So let's start off at the start. In terms of, I've sort of already touched on it, like the family being ignorant. The backstory here is that Miguel's like ancestors, one of his ancestors was a musician, and eventually the husband left his wife and his child to pursue a career in music.
Yeah.
Right? And
but we don't figure that out till later on.
Well, no, we're told that at the start. We're told that at the start because that's like what the family. Yeah, because that's why the family doesn't want him to.
Oh yeah, my bad. We don't know who the father is.
Yeah, we don't know who it is. We just know that there's a father, and he left his family to go pursue music, and that has made the rest of his family completely,
disregard music.
Yeah, they don't want, they want to banish it essentially, and
Yeah.
for me that's just so ignorant. I mean,
It's a bit stupid.
they think the music is the bad thing because the father left the family, and it seems as though like the music wasn't the only problem in that situation.
It wasn't the only variable in it.
Yeah, perhaps the father was just, a bad person and would have left, regardless of his musical talent, Maybe he would have left to pursue other things. Maybe he just would have left in general. It's not the music. It just seems like so, I don't know, like so cliche.
It's kind of like in a way, saying, a father leaves, their daughter and their mother, because he's a alcoholic, and then he leaves them, and then the mother bans the kid from ever drinking alcohol. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, it's like you've missed the point here.
Where's the connection?
Yeah, isn't the two aren't correlated? The father seems like the father wasn't, well, as far as we know, it seems like the father wasn't a very good person and probably would have left anyway. So that was my problem with sort of the start. I think the movie sort of picks up and when, Miguel goes to the land of the dead, because I think that's a really interesting sort of, plot mechanic. I think that's a really interesting thing to do, and we haven't really seen much.
And it looks great as well.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, every character except Miguel and Héctor was just shallow. I wasn't invested in the main character, to be honest. I mentioned that a bit previously, but you need to be invested in the main character because at the end of the day, it's their story. And for me personally, like again, this movie's probably not aimed at me, so I understand that. But I'm reviewing this movie here, so for me personally,
you have a say.
Yeah, I get my opinion, and my opinion is that the only character I really cared for was Héctor. The rest we weren't really given much to get attached to, really. But
the screen time wasn't there to have an emotional connection to them.
And this movie's very long, isn't it?
Like, I think it's like an hour 50.
Yeah, but for an animation movie, that's really long. Like
that's pretty long now that I'm thinking about it.
Think like Shrek is like an hour and a half done. Like and that movie
that's
like
true.
Flies by. Maybe it's even less than that. But
I did watch this film and I did feel that it went pretty quick there. I must say.
It was a bit of a drag for me, I must say.
It was a bit of a drag for you?
Yeah, but it's probably a personal thing anyway. So let's go to this whole dead concept. If you're okay with that, I just want to go to the more interesting part of the movie, which is obviously when does Miguel die or he just like travels back to the dead somehow. But regardless,
I guess the guitar has some sort of unexplained power that can transfer someone to the land of the dead.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it's an animated movie, so like, we go with it. I mean, we're not going to say like, oh, we don't get explained how this and that happens. Like, at the end of the day, like, there are skeletons here that are people and they're living in the land of the dead. Like, what?
You don't question it. It's kind of like a horror film where you don't question the acting because you're there for the jump scares. Yeah,
exactly. So for me, like, I was quite surprised by how the dead people were afraid of things. Because I was thinking like, well, what's the worst that's gonna happen to you, mate? Like, you're gonna die again? Like,
but we do figure out that there is a second death, but that isn't caused by
like getting your arm chopped off or something. I just don't know. I thought that was a bit weird. What were your thoughts on like the structure and the whole
land
world
of the dead?
Yeah.
It did seem a bit weird because we see this one town, right? And I guess it's close to like an edge of some cliff or something, and that this one world or this one town is connected to the whole land of the dead city. Like it seems like the whole of Mexico should be connected to this, right? Because I think it's a nationwide thing, but it seems set in this really small sort of world. I don't know, it was a bit strange, but another thing that I wanted to touch on is all of the weird ways that the actual characters died in this film. All of the previously dead characters, that is Dela Cruz and Hector and such. And we see Dela Cruz get crushed by a bell. It's like...
Yeah, that was quite funny.
Where have you ever seen that before? It's a bit strange, but it's also unique.
Yeah. I actually laughed when that happened, by the way. Like,
yeah, right.
in the first initial thing, like when they're telling you his backstory, and then like it's all happy, and then like literally a bell falls on him and he dies. Yeah. Like I didn't laugh. I was sort of just like, ha! Like I was just, I was just so. It just took me by surprise. I'm like, that's a bit weird, but okay.
You didn't expect it. Yeah. And then we see this once again with supposedly Hector choked on a chorizo. It's like...
Yeah.
Who was writing the script? It's a bit weird. But anyways, did you have anything else to touch on the Land of the Dead, or...?
Not like... Well, okay, let's go to the fact that you die twice, okay? So...
Yeah.
So in the real world, when you die, in universe, so in this movie, if you die, you go to the afterlife, right? And then... as long as you're remembered by your ancestors, you get to live in the afterlife, which seems better than nothing, I guess. So people are sort of hanging on to, being in the afterlife. They don't want to leave the afterlife because they don't know what's next. It's the whole thing about, life, essentially.
Yeah.
But
you can't go back,
Yeah, and so, but how you die in the afterlife is that if you're not remembered, you die, right? Mm-hmm. And that for me is actually like really quite cruel for a Disney film.
It's very dark in a way, yeah.
Yeah, they're saying that if you're not remembered by the people who you leave behind, or that you're not remembered by anyone, that you didn't live a significant life. And I think that's just so cruel, like for a Disney film.
That's so misrepresentative,
Yes, Disney sort of, deals with these dark topics of death and, losing people and grief and depression, like all of these different things, but they do it quite well. But here, it just seems so, I don't know, it just doesn't really work for me. Like,
it doesn't fit with you?
No, because if you're not remembered, it doesn't mean that your life was not, you didn't live a good life, or that you weren't a good person. It's sort of...
Did it say that, or...
Well, no.
I don't ever recall it saying that.
No, but it's like implicitly saying that, because if you're being remembered, then you deserve to live in the afterlife, right? But then if somebody forgets you, then you're gone. Like, you don't get to stay.
I think it's more so the fact that if someone forgets about you, your spirit passes on. It's not really that, you lived a bad life, or you're a bad person.
I'm looking at it from more of like an individual way. So like...
Yeah, obviously it's not explained, so it's up to interpretation.
Yeah, but that was my like impression of it.
That's your impression.
That was my... So that's what I thought. I was just like, well, whoa, hold up, Disney,
Yeah.
Like, we don't all have to be famous to be good people. Like...
I don't think they intended it to be that way.
Probably not, but that was how I felt. So
yeah,
I don't know. I'll have to look it up and see if anybody else, sort of got the same thing. But for me, like, I just really didn't like that at all. Like, from a philosophical standpoint, anyway. Mm-hmm. They're probably not trying to do that. But hey, if I'm watching it and thinking, hang on, what is, like, you're saying this, then. Whether they meant it or not, it's what I thought. So, I don't know. It would be interesting to see if anybody else says that. But
see, it's funny when you say that, right? Because it's like Tenet in a way, where it's up to interpretation and a lot of things are left unexplained, but you were fine with it being like that. So what changes here, right? Yeah. So I think it's also the fact that, Christopher Nolan intends for his films to be up to interpretation, whereas this film was meant to be explained in the, hour and 50 minutes that it ran for.
Yeah,
so I can see how you have that sort of viewpoint.
Yeah, I mean, you don't go into this movie like wanting a mystery or anything like that, but
Yeah.
yeah, that was just my initial impression. I mean, we'll move on from this now because I'm probably talking about it too much, but that was just my initial impression from it, and like whether they intended that or not, that's what I thought. So,
Yeah.
for me, that just leaves a bad taste as to, the people producing this movie. But whatever.
Moving on. I did like the concepts in this film, and again, I feel like they could have done a lot better with it. Like, all of the twists along the way were surprising. I didn't see them coming.
I do agree with that, yeah.
Yeah, and it could have been done better.
Probably should have seen them coming, but didn't.
Yeah. So it could have been done better. It's just that they probably didn't, something must have gone wrong in the filmmaking process that caused viewers like you to misinterpret the actual meaning of some of the plot points and such in this film.
Yeah, but in terms of like what they were trying to mean with the whole "you get forgotten," I don't think that was like a specific plot point. I think that was probably just my interpretation of something that happened. It's not like a main part, but regardless, yeah, no, I agree. I want to just quickly say that when these singing scenes happen, they don't ever sing into the microphone. Their
See,
voice...
it's stuff like that I don't pick up on because I don't care about it. But go on.
It's just I don't know. It's just funny for me. The fact that
it's a little thing, yeah.
They're singing like obviously it's a musical and so whatever. But I just thought that was funny. They start off with the microphone and they just walk off and their voice is like still being projected. I'm like, well, mate, you need to go back to the microphone because they can't hear you.
Yeah.
But back to the twists. I probably should have seen Cruz being the bad guy coming, but for some...
I honestly wouldn't have thought I would see it.
For some reason, I didn't see it coming, because obviously, the idol, he's what the main character wants to be.
Yeah.
And he turns out to be the bad guy, and that's such a predictable thing. I just didn't see it coming.
Here we go again. Your rehashed movie.
Yeah, it's so unoriginal, but
we'll get into the plot twist at the end because I think we should go through this in chronological order.
Okay, yeah. What do you have next? Because I don't have a lot of notes in terms of what comes in that middle. So yeah, you go for it.
I just want to touch on this thing that I saw at the Land of the Dead talent show or whatever, the Sunrise Spectacular or something like that. Where Miguel and Héctor perform. A few sets before them, we see a Skrillex cameo. Did you pick up on that?
A Skrillex cameo?
Yeah.
What?
You didn't pick up on that, yeah. So we see one of the Land of the Dead people. He has this massive DJ booth on the set, and he has the same appearances as Skrillex, obviously the world-renowned DJ that no one listens to anymore.
Oh, good on you.
Yeah, but he's in there for some reason. I don't know why they put him in there. He might have voiced someone or something.
Oh, nice. That's weird.
And just also touching on another point that I kind of picked up on. At the start of the film, we kind of see how Héctor doesn't really Remember Me. And that might be due to the fact that he obviously didn't intend for it to be such a big piece of music. And he just wanted it for Coco.
Yeah.
But that kind of reminisced to me about how Nirvana doesn't really Smells Like Teen Spirit, because that's all everyone ever listens to when they think of Nirvana is Smells Like Teen Spirit, so they don't actually listen to any of their other music. That kind of sparked that in my brain for some reason. I don't know, I thought I'd write that down. So I also picked up on this sort of thing that was a bit weird to me, how Miguel is in the Land of the Dead, right? So everyone there has previously died in the living portion of their life.
Yep.
And no one's questioning him that he's a kid. No one picked up on the fact that he must have died some way at such a young age.
Yeah, when their reactions to him, they're like, hey, how's it going?
Yeah, right?
They're not like, oh my gosh, you died.
I didn't see
so
any
young.
other kids in the Land of the Dead either.
Oh, yeah,
he's the only one, so... I don't know, it was a bit weird, but...
Yeah.
Moving on to Dela Cruz's party, when we first see Miguel walk in, we also see him look up at a screen, and we see a movie clip of Dela Cruz riding a horse, and we hear Dela Cruz say the name Dante. I think he says, like, Faster Dante or something. And Dante is the name of the dog in this film that is Miguel's sort of sidekick in a way.
Oh, yeah.
So that's like another callback, I guess.
Oh, cool.
It doesn't really work in like chronological order because he didn't know that film was a thing. I don't know. Oh, he might have named it after the film, actually. That's what might have happened.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's true, actually. He probably did.
That's probably what happened. But do you want to say anything else before we move on to the final act and talk about all of the plot twists and such?
I just want to touch on a few character moments. So at one stage, like, obviously Miguel bumps into Héctor, who's sort of like this rebellious skeleton. And when they have a bit of a confrontation, Miguel says to him, "You don't want to help me, you only care about yourself." And Héctor sort of like, takes that as a big oof. And but that is probably quite hypocritical, considering that Miguel, this 12-year-old kid, has gone on this whole adventure because his family told him to not play music and he wants to play music.
Yeah.
His entire motivation in this movie is selfish, and there's never really a learning curve for him as to, him realizing that. He learns to value his family more, but he never thinks, oh, I was only sort of thinking about myself there.
Yeah.
And his character just became so hypocritical when he said that. But that's just what I felt anyway. And then sort of towards the end, obviously, we have some big reveals, and Héctor's family, they still try to outcast him, even though they have no reason to, but I'll touch more on that when we get into that. So do you want to get into the final act now?
Yeah, so, like Onward, I think that the final act is probably the best part of this film.
I agree.
It's where everything's sort of explained, it's where everything kind of finds its place, and it's also the most emotional sequence of the film.
I agree. Actually, sorry, can I go back real quick? Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
There's a scene where Héctor is playing the guitar for the old skeleton before he goes off to the afterlife, or not the afterlife, sorry, where he dies for real.
The second death. I think
the second death, because somebody forgets him.
Yep.
And that scene for me was really, really good. I really liked that scene.
That was a good scene, yeah.
Yeah. And then obviously, we get the whole explanation as to what happens to you when somebody forgets you. But in terms of that scene there, I really liked that. That was probably one of the few times where I was, fully engaged and immersed and invested.
Yeah, and that's because it features, Héctor, who was probably... He carried this movie. I'm going to say he carried this movie. And his character was different, and it was, it had this sort of direction to it. And it's stuff like that they should have focused the film on. I wanted to see more of that sort of thing.
Yeah, but also
but they didn't really touch on that.
The other skeleton there, so the old skeleton who's dying or, being forgotten essentially. And I just thought that was such a heartbreaking scene, and it shows that, there's good... I mean, we had no idea who that guy was, but I was more invested in him than Miguel.
Yeah.
So, but that's just going back to like midway through, because I really enjoyed that scene. But no, let's go back to the final act.
Just quickly, now that you've brought that up, another thing that I wanted to talk about is when people die, right, in the living world, they die and they come to the land of the dead.
Yep.
What form do they come in as? Do they come in as the point they died, or is it like a random time, or...
I think it's the point that they died, because Héctor looks like quite a young guy, and he did die quite old. And then Coco, obviously, when she dies later on, she goes into the living dead very old. And
that's what I was thinking.
And it looks really weird, because obviously they're reunited, and Héctor is Coco's father. But Héctor looks so much younger than Coco, because he is, because he died younger.
He's older, but he's younger.
Yeah.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. That's what I
guess that was sort of well. It wasn't explained, but they didn't have any plot holes in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving on to the final act where all the twists happen. We find out the first twist, I think, was when we find out that Dela Cruz took the credit for Hector's songs, and also the fact that he poisoned Hector and killed him to steal all of the credit from him. What did you think about
that? Again, I think in terms of like the fact that Hector wrote the songs, I think that's quite interesting. You know, I'm sure that's happened quite a lot in the music industry. You know, and it does happen. You know, we think, you know, all these Justin Biebers of the world and, you know, the Taylor Swifts and stuff, and obviously they write some of their music, but the majority of the time they don't. They're just singing it, which is obviously, you know, the major part of it, but you know, they've got to sing something, and so somebody's got to get credit for, you know, writing the thing. So I thought that was interesting in terms of, you know, Miguel creating the songs and the Cruz sort of, you know, using them and going for it. But in terms of, you know, Cruz's motives to, you know, eventually do what he does, I think he probably places a bit too... I think he's insane in some ways, because he's sort of obsessed.
He's a bit psychopathic, yeah.
Yeah, so, but yeah, I thought it was good. I thought it was interesting, the fact that Miguel owns that Hector rather...
Hector, yeah.
Yeah, created the actual songs. He's sort of like the unsung hero, like literally the unsung hero.
Yeah, true.
So yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and when you realise that, you know, Hector, all he wanted to do was go back and see his daughter, Coco, before he vanished, that's all he wanted to do, and it's kind of sad when you realise that he doesn't really have that opportunity because, you know, everything's been taken away from him. And again, that kind of gives his character sort of depth and something to cling on to rather than, you know, Miguel and such. But yeah, that's just another thing I wanted to touch on. Yeah, so another thing that we found out in a cool twist is that Hector is actually Miguel's father. There's actually quite a few twists.
Yeah, or great-great-great-grandfather, you mean?
Yeah, great-great-great-great, whatever, grandfather.
Yeah, and can I just touch on that for a second? I think the family tree is so confusing in this movie. I don't know who is who at all.
Yeah, there's so many different characters.
Yeah, it's so complicated to follow, you know, especially considering most of them are obviously dead and they're all skeletons and they don't have very distinctive facial features. But I don't think it's actually, you know, their facial appearance. I think it's the fact that we're never given enough time to sort of invest in them and invest in who they are. We're sort of just like given like 10 or so family members at the start and expected to remember who they are. But I forgot all of them. So, you know, the only people that I know are Miguel, Hector, and Cruz, and Coco. I have no idea what the family tree looks like at all.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, so we find out that Hector is Miguel's father, which I thought was quite well done. It was delivered well, and we also discover that Coco is also the only person that remembers Hector in the living world. And then that also brings a sense of, you know, there is consequences. We can see as the audience, we can see that there is a possibility that Hector will be forgotten and will die for the second time. And he will never get to see his daughter. Another, not really twist, but another thing that is explained is that we figure out that Hector wrote Remember Me for Coco. It's kind of like when, I don't know if you've seen Rocket Man, where I should have thought of... I knew this well before the movie, but it's explained that Elton wrote your song for Bernie. He didn't intend it for someone else. He intended it for this person. And it's kind of like this in a way.
Okay.
Where he didn't write this song for the world. He wrote the song for his daughter. Which I thought was quite good. And when you listen to the lyrics as well, it kind of makes sense. Yeah, this is a song intended for his daughter.
Yeah.
And even the name, you know, it's probably not a cameo, but it's probably an Easter egg as to, you know, remember me before I'm forgotten. Kind of that in a way. Yeah, I thought I'd touch on that. Yeah, I also love how the so-called hero at the start of the film turns into the unexpected villain. So yeah, I also love how the hero at the start of the film, who we think is the hero, he turns into this unexpected villain.
Yeah, what a plot twist.
Yeah, we see that a bit, but I didn't see it coming
Yeah,
this
me
time.
neither.
And a lot of the other films I can see it coming, but in this one I just didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
And that's probably because they touched on Dela Cruz being, you know, such an icon to Miguel and you know, the most famous musician ever.
Yeah.
You don't see it coming in, and then it hits you and you're like, oh, there it was. Yeah, so we also see Dela Cruz get crushed by another bell.
Can we go to the... Is that before we realise that Miguel was actually murdered by Cruz? I mean, Hector, sorry. Hector was actually murdered.
So we already touched on that.
Okay.
There was a twist that Hector Hector was murdered by Dela Cruz. He was poisoned. Yeah.
And can I just say on that, I just want to touch on that for a second.
Yeah, go
on. Hector's family don't know that he was, you know, in fact murdered or killed.
Yeah.
Right? They think, you know, he went for a holiday and then never came back. And
Yeah.
then they just decided that he ran away. And again, that's just such ignorance on the part of the family.
Yeah.
You know, surely they found his body. Like, what? It doesn't make sense for me. You know, as soon as we learnt that, I was like, well, you know, this family's already shown that they were ignorant in terms of, you know, why they wanted to banish music from Miguel's life.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, they're being ignorant of the fact that Hector went on holiday and then never came back, and then just decided that he ran away to pursue music, and that was it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't really like that. I'm saying a lot of negatives for this movie because I just was never invested. So the negatives were so prominent for me.
You picked
personally.
up on all of the negatives, yeah.
Yeah. But overall, I do think it's a pretty okay movie. Like in terms of, like again, I don't think it's aimed at me. I don't think this is a movie that I'm supposed to like. But but I think I do recognise the fact that it's a pretty good movie. But the negatives were more prominent for me. And then in terms of his dead wife, so Hector's dead wife, right, doesn't even know that Hector was murdered. And she still can't forgive him for running away, even though he didn't run away.
Yeah.
And so Hector's wife, sort of like for a solid part of the movie, she learnt that Hector was, you know, murdered. And then she still can't forgive him. And I'm just thinking,
I think there was even a line that Miguel said to her. He said Hector was murdered, and she's like, so what if he was murdered? It's like,
yeah, it's
wait,
like,
hold
what?
on, like, what?
And then she was
so
like, oh, I still can't forgive him. I'm like, forgive him for what, lady? Like, what does he...
what did he do?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and also, like, just another negative before I shut up is the fact that the goal in this movie is ever-changing. Like, the plot wasn't clear for me. In Onward, right, it's so clear what the plot is, right?
For sure.
Dad has half come back. We need to make him fully come back. We got till tomorrow. Let's go.
Yep.
Whereas in this, it's like, okay, Miguel has died, but he hasn't. He needs to go back to get his blessing. Also, he can't sing songs, so he needs to go get his family's blessing to go back. His family don't like him because he wants to sing songs. He goes to his idol. His idol's a bad guy. His great-grandfather was murdered. Like, what? What?
Like, is Hector the main part of the story because he wants to go back to see Coco, or is...
I think he does become the main part of the story.
At the end, it kind of seems like that, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a saving grace because, as we said, you know, the third act for me is the best part of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, so moving on, we see, once again, Dela Cruz gets crushed by another bell.
Yeah, that was funny.
Seems to be a reoccurring thing in
but
this film.
he didn't die there, did he? Because he's just like...
Well, no, you can't die in the land of the dead. Yeah. Well, you can die, but not that way.
Yeah.
Not by infliction of harm or injury or some other sort. Yeah, so at the end of the movie, we see Coco join the family when she dies.
Yeah, it's nice.
And yeah, so she joins them and she crosses the bridge and such. So that must have been a year after, because I think the Day of the Dead is held each year. Yeah, so we also see Hector get to visit the family across the other side as well.
Yep.
And we also see Hector's photo get put up, and we also see Coco's photo get put up on the shrine. I don't know what it was called.
Yeah.
Probably should.
So they're remembered, essentially.
Yeah. So they're remembered.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Coco joins the land of the dead, and that's basically all I had for the notes there.
Yeah, I think the third act is a lot better, and it's very similar to Onward in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
The first part is probably wouldn't have kept going personally for me.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, I don't think it's Pixar at its best. But it does, Pixar. It's a Pixar curse, really, because whenever Pixar releases a movie, as soon as they do, it's going to get compared to their best work, and their best work is, A+ material.
Yeah, we're not going to say what it is, because when we eventually do a podcast,
yeah, it's fantastic. Some of their movies are absolute classics and they're perfect. So
yeah,
it's so hard for Pixar. Like, I really empathize with what they're trying to do. They're trying to do some new things. They're not trying to make a Cars 4 or God forbid they make a Toy Story 5 or some.
I think they're done with that.
I wouldn't put it past them, to be honest, in like 7 years to do Toy Story 5, but yeah, for me it just suffers in comparison. But that's a Pixar curse, I guess. Alright, music segment this week. For those of you who don't know, we have a playlist on Spotify called the Rewatch playlist. You can follow it. You can listen to it in the YouTube description by visiting that link there. It'll take you directly to it. Every week we post a maximum of 2 or a minimum of 1 song from the official soundtrack of the movie that we watched this week. So, for example, we have some songs from Into the Spider-Verse, Joker, Tenet, Shrek, Revenge of the Sith. So, Coco, this week we've got Un Poco Loco.
Un Poco Loco or something like that.
Yeah, I've completely butchered the pronunciation, but one of the more, iconic, I guess, songs.
I like it because it's a meme. I don't know if you've seen it,
no,
but it's a meme. It's that really weird thing that I think it didn't start on TikTok, but you see it a lot on TikTok where it's got that sort of wiggly voice where it's like, you know what I mean?
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, and then the voice goes all, and then the screen goes all like wavy and such.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. I've seen that a lot in the memes for some reason.
Yeah. And the second song going in, so there's 2 songs going in this week. The second song is Remember Me, and it's the lullaby version. And is that when Miguel's singing to Coco?
No, that's when Hector is singing to Coco, younger version.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very nice. Right, so those are the 2 songs going in. Again, if you'd like to listen to the playlist or follow it, you can visit the link in the YouTube description.
Yeah, well, do you want to do your final sort of rating then?
Yeah, okay. So I'll again reiterate the fact that this movie probably isn't for me. But
look, if we were to put ourselves in the audience's shoes as 8-year-old kids, this film would probably be a standard. They would love this film. They would take it in and enjoy it. But looking at it from our perspective, it comes a lot different.
Yeah, I think the movie has heart, right? But it just struggles to show it sometimes. I think, the movie's very colourful. However, as I said at the start, the animation's getting to a stage where I think it's too good. And it takes away from the unique style of it. The music's good, and it ties in well with the movie. And I did go and research, and the critics have said that it's very culturally sensitive, culturally accurate in terms of the celebration and everything like that. So I think that is a big plus. They didn't sort of take any liberties. They didn't sort of change the facts of the celebration that's traditional to Mexico. So I think that's a big thing. If they got that wrong, so many people would have been angry for good reason.
Yeah.
I think the movie's a combination of a variety of different successful animation movies, like Kung Fu Panda and everything like that. And obviously, I think this movie was probably inspired by, that movie of a similar nature. But anyway, I can't say. I think it's similar to Onward in respect that it's not Pixar's best work, and I feel as though the movie's far too long. It's an hour and 45 minutes, so I felt it drag because I was never really invested in any of the characters except Héctor. So I'm going to give it the exact same as Onward. I'm going to give it a B-.
Okay. I'll go through mine now.
Yep.
So overall, this film had one of the most unique and inspiring stories to come from Pixar. And that's not saying it's done the best. That's saying that it was different, and they had potential for it to be the best. And I do think that its animation style, story, and the music in this film made it quite enjoyable to watch for the first time.
Yeah.
And this is my second time watching it, and I don't really see myself watching it again in the future, or at least for quite some time. I'd rather pick something like Cars or something to watch, which is a lot more enjoyable.
It's a Pixar's problem.
Yeah. So I do feel that this film deserves higher than average in terms of a ranking. It's not a Cars 2.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So I do think that also a B- is quite justified with the rating.
So we're agreeing, are we?
I do agree, yeah.
It's good to be on the same page again.
Yeah.
Too much division going on here on the Rewatch. But we're back.
We are back.
That's all from us today. If you would like to follow us on Instagram, you can do so by finding us at the Rewatch Pod. We'll be announcing our next episode on there shortly. If you would like to subscribe to the YouTube channel, just search the Rewatch on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
See ya.